TV, you don't need to worry about that. So, my name's Chris, and I'm from Cardiff, from South Wales, grew up in West Wales, and I'll tell you a bit about how I got on into all of this. But first I just want to say, what a phenomenal presentation this morning of Gary and Kaz. And, when I saw Penturk Incident on the TV, I was like, oh, some Welsh person has seen a flying saucer a few times around the mountains or something. I had no idea that that's what it was actually going to turn out to be. And, where is Kaz? There you are, down the back of the room. So I think it's really perfect, the talk that I've been asked to do today. I didn't do any solid preparation. One, because it's such a passion of mine, and I'm talking about this all the time. But secondly, because when you have like a deep intuition of just like follow what your guidance is saying, and mine was like, don't prepare for this. And it wasn't really till last night that I got clear on exactly what we're going to be doing. And it's going to nicely slot in and answer hopefully some questions about who was on that craft in Penturk that night. So it's a perfect follow-on. So, as long as I can remember, I've always been into sci-fi. I'm a big Trekkie. I should have really come along in a Trekkie outfit today, but I couldn't find one big enough. So I've had to settle for the tweed instead. And, as long as I can remember, I was watching Star Trek on TV as a kid, absolutely loved it. Used to wake up, 1 o'clock in the morning, thinking about being Wesley Crusher on the Starship Enterprise and all of that kind of stuff. And when I was about 13 years old, one of my dad's close friends, Richard, he had been in Central America. And there were some, UFOs flying around, as they do, all over the place. All over some sacred sites, if I can remember. And I think it was his footage, or it was naturally filmed. It wasn't like documentary or anything, of these beings who promised they'd be back at a certain time and a certain date, and there were many hundreds, if not thousands, of people who were at those sites. And I was 13 years old, like watching this for 2 hours with my family and my mum and dad, and I was intrigued and also scared. And that was really the beginning of that part of my journey. So, back in the mid-90s, as that was, there was a lot of stuff that came out in the British newspapers around crop circles. Can you remember that? Yeah. There used to be a lot of stuff in the daily press. Shame it's not out now, but it used to be a lot then. And I remember one specific story where a lady was, I think, front page of the Sun or something, where she had been abducted by aliens. And she was telling the story of what happened, and it was in a few newspapers as far as I remember. And, I used to cut all these things out, all of these newspaper articles that I could find, and my mum used to save them for me, and I would be fascinated by every word. Like, I would be reading them over and over and over and over again. My mum used to say, how often are you going to read that article? And I used to have a big bunk bed, and underneath the bunk bed and the desk I used to stick all of these cutouts of the stuff I could find in the newspapers around the aliens. And when I was 14, in the local community there was a local social club. And there'd be quizzes and discos and parties throughout the summer and barbecues late at night. And I would be lying down on the grass, staring up at the sky, UFO watching. I'd be like running back into the room and telling all the parents, I've seen a UFO. They'd come out and go, no, Chris, that's another satellite. Hoping and praying that I could just see one. So that really started quite a deep journey of inquiry for me with the whole alien agenda. And when I was in my early 20s, I went through a pretty normal spiritual awakening, and one of the most influential works on my path was Bringers of the Dawn by Barbara Marciniak. Hands up if you've ever come across that. Yep. Phenomenal teaching, right? Huge energy upgrade, huge influence on my life. So one of the things I will do is I'll email across a document to Danielle within a few days, which will put a lot of reference material in, like books, names that I'm talking about, any questions that I haven't answered, so you really have like a reference point to go and do your own research. Because there's such a depth of information to talk about. This is a humongous subject, and I've got a little over an hour to put it in, so I'm really not going to be able to give you the basis that I want to. And as I said, I'm acting on the hunch of what I really want to go into. So just be open to what I'm saying and do the research for yourself, and I hope it opens some doors for you and makes a difference for you all. Okay, so let's go for it. So one of the things I've become very present to recently on my spiritual journey is, you know, when we look up at the sky, we can see our galaxy, the Milky Way, right? And there's apparently billions of stars in the sky. And we're shown through, you know, hypothesis or proposition, through technology, the amount of galaxies that exist apparently in our cosmos. Have you seen those pictures? There's like infinite, right? You can't get your head around it. There's superclusters of galaxies, and there's the cosmos. And we're told through particularly New Age communities, and even Einstein postulated, that there are infinite parallel universes. So it's not just our universe, but there's also dimensions and different planes within the universe, and there's other universes, right? So the scope of existence is absolutely ginormous, right? And my belief is that the Creator does not waste space with existence. There's life in everything. And we're too busy, you know, our society's often too busy looking at, you know, what we see as having 2 arms and 2 legs, or a humanoid or an Earth kind of species, looking for that on other planets, when we don't realise there's other dimensions. And, you know, Star Trek teaches us that life can exist in so many different forms, right? And I believe that's what it was actually doing. So I want you to close your eyes just for a minute, okay? And to imagine that our galaxy is a cell within the body of the Creator, which is the universe. Okay? And it may even be like a bubble, or at most an organ within the body of the universe. And every organ has a purpose, right? The heart has a purpose, the stomach has a purpose, the liver has a purpose, the spleen has a purpose. And each cell is represented by a galaxy has a story to it. It has a purpose. Okay? Now take us back to our galaxy. And now imagine that everything that's going on within this big, you know, star-filled Milky Way that we look up at night, there is a cosmic story playing out. And within the bigger universe itself, our galaxy has a purpose. Okay, open your eyes. Okay? So I'm going to share a couple of reference points before I go into things, just to give a bit of basis for where I get my information from. So I'm going to source a lot of channeled materials. As I said, Barbara Marciniak with Bringers of the Dawn. Bashar, who's channeled by Darrell Anker, who I'm sure some of you have heard of. He's probably my favourite. The Law of One teachings, which are channelings from Venus, where this lady comes from. She obviously knows yeah. So we just had a joke this morning that she comes from Venus. She might do, actually. So the Law of One teachings, and Lisa Royal Holt, the Prism of Lyra. Lyra is a constellation not too far away from our sun. Yeah, and the Pleiadian Keys to the Living Library, Barbara Marciniak again, and the Pleiadian Agenda by Barbara Mark Hubbard. That's a lot of reference point that I use, and most of the time they're saying very similar things. And, you know, one of the things that I practice, I'm not the most grounded of person spiritually, but I think one of my strengths is I do what's called occult research. And occult can be a funny word, but what it really is where you can have certain ideas, contemplate them, meditate on them to gain information, either with, you know, spirit guides, or with masters, or with the higher self, and over time build up an acumen and a strength of being able to do this, and then being able to put that information alongside other sources of information. And what I'm consistently finding, particularly in the last 5 years of my life, is that when I do occult research, I then read something that completely validates what I've been reading, okay? And I find that I have this ability to, like, open a page of a book, and then 2 hours later I'll be somewhere else and I'll open another page of a book on exactly the right page, and it'll have the next bit of information in there. And one of my teachers, because I'm an astrologer, a guy called Chris Gasparis, who used to live at this lighthouse many years ago, he knows Danielle quite well, he said when he did my astrological chart 10 years ago, he just said it's because you've spent, he said, so many lifetimes researching and collecting information that you have an ability to tap into the Akashic field and pull through information. So the reason I'm telling you that is not trying to inspire you or impress you, but because how I go about doing my research is it comes to me in that kind of way. All right? So the pyramids on Earth, the Egyptian pyramids, or if you would call them Egyptian pyramids, because not everybody's convinced they were built by the Egyptians. You may have heard that they are aligned with the Orion constellation, yeah? And some people think that's just because that's what they did. When actually, in reality, the exact location on Earth, the geolocation of the pyramids, is exactly the same as the speed of light. Go and research that yourself on Google, okay? And that's telling us that there's a scientific indicator or even basis for that the position of the pyramids are attuned to be able to harness a light frequency, because it is that exact location. And we're told through the channel teachings, through pretty much all of them, that our most recent, you could say millions of years, because how long has the galaxy been around for, we don't know. Probably far longer than what they think. In the most few recent million of years is where the particular cycle or story that we're in galactically has actually happened in our part of the galaxy, right? And it's got a lot to do with what we call the Orion agenda. So the Orion homeworld, many millions of years ago, and I'm going to say this speaking like it's what I believe to be the truth. Obviously, what is the truth? But it's citing various sources, so I just want to state that I'm going to speak it like that. So millions of years ago in the Orion homeworld, there was kind of a Star Wars oppression going on. And I'm not into Star Wars, so I'm not telling you that because of some kind of fantasy fiction. I've only ever seen the modern Star Wars on one occasion, okay? I'm a Trekkie, but not Star Wars. And there was a number of star systems in the Orion constellation that were under great oppression through an extraterrestrial force. And it was far, far greater than what we would know as ET oppression, or any kind of slavery that exists on this planet. So much so that spiritually they couldn't even incarnate outside of that star system. If they went over to spirit, and had a number of years before they'd reincarnate into the planetary sphere, they were trapped on incarnating within those systems itself. So it was under a great, great darkness and oppression force, and they had to literally learn how to evolve that system through the physical experience themselves, okay? Why was that actually going on? Why did that happen, okay? So part of my occult research that I haven't got time to go into today will tell you this, is that I've learned that our galaxy is the spleen of the body of the Creator in our universe. I would love to do a talk on how that is so. I haven't got time today, but I'll suffice it to say that it's pretty obvious that it is, right? And Dwal Kul, who is a master who channeled through Madame Blavatsky, who you may have heard of, and through Alice Bailey, he in his recent materials has said that our galaxy is a spleen, which is a figurative organ of the body of the Creator with a double symbolism, and it will be revealed to us much further on in human evolution what that is. So what does the spleen do? Any biologists in the room? Anybody who knows? What does the spleen do at a physical level in the body? It filters the blood. It filters the junk. Now, spiritually speaking, it filters the prana as well. It purifies energy, okay? So let's think that cosmic evil has a place to play within evolution, yeah? Two contrasting polarities of light and dark, and existence happens in between that, right? And there's much, much to say about that. So consider that our galaxy is a filtration system for evolving and transmuting cosmic evil through the physical experience. Okay, you with me? All right. So that's part of why we have so much evil on Earth, okay? So this was going on and playing out in its most intense drama in the constellation of Orion. And over many, many eons, a very, 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 very long time, they beat their oppressors. And then they then went into space and they colonized the Lyran and the Pleiadian star systems. And the Pleiadians look just like humans. And one of the things that they realized is that actually beating people through war is not the answer. The Creator's energy and the Creator's life force is actually unconditional love. That's the highest force that there is. And they didn't beat their oppressors through unconditional love. They did it because they killed them, and they stopped the oppressors. And so there was another aspect of the story that needed to be played out. for that part of the Creator's plan to be accomplished. So you may have heard of the Anunnaki. Most people have. The Anunnaki, the gold diggers, they came to Earth, they dug the gold, they used the gold to regulate weather patterns on their planet because their planet was dying. They were quite a demonic, very angelic at the same time, powerful race that came to Earth 500,000 or so years ago, and they altered the genetic code of the indigenous species living on the planet, which was Homo erectus, and they turned them into a workforce, yes, slaves, to help them dig the gold and the minerals from the mines. There is a lot of evidence on this. Michael Tellinger's done a lot of work on this. Zechariah Sitchin has written books on this. There's ancient texts, there's clay tablets, there are mines that have been dug in the Middle East millions of years ago, gold mines that are still evidential. We'll provide all this reference material for you. So there is a lot of evidence that this has actually taken place, both in scriptures and in physical mining itself. Okay, it's phenomenal to explore the research, right? And what they did is they altered the original Homo erectus, okay, and which they weren't meant to do. And one of the things that happened is a few 100,000 years later, which could have been literally tens of thousands of years ago in our history, the Anunnaki had grown massively in terms of their evolution over hundreds of thousands of years. They'd grown more into discovering, I guess, who they were as creators and what their role is within creation. And they provided what was known as Enki's gift. So Enki was the name given to one of the original Anunnaki brothers who was responsible for the genetic alteration of the human race, Enki and Enlil, as the scriptures say. And Enki's gift was where he realized that there was an evolution and there was a purpose playing out within all of this. That the Enki's gift was where he helped oversee with the Pleiadians the genetic integration of a number of species into the human genetic code. Okay? And that was the second alteration that's taken place. Now, interestingly, Blavatsky, who wrote The Secret Doctrine, who channeled teaching from the Masters, said that in that book as well, that there have been two major alterations taking place. And the third is underway already, which we'll be going into. So, one of the original researchers for DNA in England in the last century, he said that the human genetic code, being a natural phenomenon, it's more likely that a hurricane could move through a scrapyard and assemble a jumbo 747 through the wind going round than the human genetic structure being a completely natural process. Okay? So, there's a lot of this going around, isn't there? The New Age communities and the channeled materials, that the human genetic code has been interfered with. And there's a lot more to say about that in terms of research as well. So, going into now a subject of parallel realities and moving more into the hybrid agenda. So Einstein postulated there was infinite parallel realities, right? And one of the things that I'm discovering is that realities overlap, universes overlap in their evolution. They provide different things, and they actually sometimes intermingle when they've got the technology to, and stimulate different forms of growth. So what does that mean? Well, imagine a parallel Earth, okay, in a different universe with an identical human being, okay? And they became overly obsessed with technology to a degree where they disassociated with the Earth, with Mother Earth, with the emotional self, with the spiritual self, in the name of intellect and technology, which is kind of like what humanity, in a sense, is, one of the negative paths we could potentially go down. And what they did is they overmined their planet in the name of technology, and they actually ended up destroying their Earth. And they realized there wasn't anything they could do about it, and they couldn't go to another planet because you can't move an entire civilization. So they genetically started altering themselves, which they'd already been doing anyway. And the civilization that they ended up with was the Greys. Yes? 3-4 foot tall aliens, Greys, the ones we see, the most popular aliens in the ET circle, the ones with the big black eyes. Okay? So their technology apparently went extremely far beyond our technology. And they started coming into parallel realities as they can, and looking for how they could perhaps find human beings that hadn't been altered, take their DNA, infuse it into their own, okay, and perpetuate their race. This is where the hybrid agenda begins. Now, in ET phenomenology, we always see these like tall mantis beings appearing behind the graves, yeah? This is always talked about. If you've seen on like certain movies and like the X-Files, you see tall mantis beings standing behind the grey aliens, and they're in the background, okay? Those aliens are from Zeta Reticuli, so they're indigenous to this galaxy and this universe. And they are what you could call overseers and oversight of the entire hybrid agenda that's going on. Now, there used to be an MP, can't remember his name, Stephen something from England.
Simon Parks?
That's him. What's his
Simon
name?
Parks.
Simon Parks. He knows that he has contact with these aliens, and he's met them, he's been abducted by them, he's in conscious contact with them. And there's even foresight saying spiritually that they may even be partially the future of the human race, not genetically speaking, but in terms of soul incarnation. You know, like the future of humanity when we're very evolved, or somehow incarnating into them at this point in time to work out this hybrid agenda. So they're overseeing the plan, right? And the grey aliens kind of like handed it over to them because they kind of like knew what they were doing. They could see the full picture that was playing out. And because they destroyed their world, one of the knock-on effects that they created through the law of cause and effect, through, I guess you could say, a cosmic law of karma, is the necessity to actually, rebalance their energy. Right? Hands up if you concur. I know this talk today is very spiritual compared to the talk we just had, right? But I am talking in terms of like consciousness and spirituality as well as, and I think we've got to wake up as a human race to the reality that these two things are intertwined, they're not separate. You can't have, understanding what aliens are without understanding the nature and the universal and cosmic and spiritual laws that exist alongside that. So basically what happened is that the grey aliens destroyed their world, and with the help of the Zeta Reticuli aliens, they actually found a planet in their universe that had naturally died out, and they brought it back to life again through technology and consciousness, okay? Now, we're going to pause on that note now. When they started abducting human beings, of which there are many, many dozens, if not hundreds, of very good testimonials from around the planet, citing what they've done, they're all saying the same thing. That they are extracting genetic material and they're producing hybrid races, okay? And some people have even been shown children that they have on other planets which are connected to their genetic code. And you might be thinking, God, why is this all so important? It's so critical because it's, as I'm going to explain, it's a very fundamental part of where humanity is actually going next. So, on a side note to that, we have in what we call theosophy, which again was a material channeled and written by Madame Blavatsky, we talk about the races of humanity, and it all works to the number 7. So we're told that we're in the 5th root race of humanity, and the 5th root race is what we understand as the modern civilization: Celtic, Anglo-Saxon, Mongolian, Chinese, Latin, Hispanic. That's all part of the 5th root race. And what root races do is they establish, create and anchor an evolutionary phase of growth within humanity. So if you look culturally throughout human history, we can see major periods of human development happen in relation to certain races, yes? We're currently on the 5th sub-race of the 6th root race, which is Anglo-Saxon and Celtic, right? Britain's had a massive influence, the UK massive influence in the world. So that's the most recent sub-race. The 6th sub-race is what you'd know as the Indigo Kids, the Crystal Kids, the Rainbow Kids, Challenger Behaviours, Learning Disorders. Very different way of interpreting the world, okay? Because the next major phase of human evolution and development is no longer physical, it's consciousness. It's coming out of this reality into a multi-dimensional existence, okay? So, and then we have what will be established as the sixth root race, all right? So going back to the hybrids, grey aliens took human DNA and produced a hybrid race using their DNA and human DNA. That was hybrid race number 1. They then took their DNA, hybrid DNA number 1, and fresh human DNA and produced hybrid race number 2 that look even more human. They then produced DNA using the Greys, their own DNA, hybrid DNA of race 1, hybrid DNA of race 2, human DNA, and produced the third hybrid race that look even more human because they're getting fresh DNA infused into the cocktail every time. And then that went on so on and so forth until they got to the fourth hybrid race, who are that civilization I was talking about, where that world had been brought back to life again through technology and consciousness. And that planet is called Esasani. It's in a different, literally parallel reality. And the civilization that live on that planet are called the Sasani. And they are the fourth hybrid race. And the fifth hybrid race are called the Yael. And the Yael look almost identical to humans, because they have the most amount of fresh genetic material inside of them. Now, the interesting thing about that is that, you know, Bashar, who I was citing before, he is from the Sasani civilization on Sasani, and he's a first contact specialist, and he is a major source of ET, you know, research and phenomenology in the world. You know, millions of fans all around the world, and he is my go-to for integrity of information. And he says that after disclosure happens, which we're on the brink of now, they're trying to hold it back and hold it back and hold it back. When it does actually take place, very shortly afterwards, there will be open contact on television with one of the hybrid races. And the very first hybrid race will be the Yael. Why they will be the Yael is because they look almost the same as human beings. A bit taller in most cases, a bit slimmer, very sharp features, very sharp small jawlines, very sharp and pointy noses, almost like beauty models, but with smaller statures and features and just as tall, yeah? So I was listening to a channel material again the other night called Your ET Neighbours, which was channeled by Bashar. I wanted to listen to it for years, and I thought, well, I'll do a bit of research for this talk. And he was asked a question about the triangular craft, which Kaz clearly saw that night. And he said there's two civilizations that actually use that craft around your planet. One is the Sasani, which is our civilization, and the other is the Yael. Okay? So I am pretty convinced that who was seen a few days after the incident walking around with the beanie jacket and the mountain hoodie on, who Kaz was very clearly hinting was not of this planet, if you had noticed, right? She was saying those features were not of the planet Yael. Yeah? They have nearly completely fresh human DNA, but partial, you know, grey DNA in them as well. And they are obviously a physical race that live in a much higher vibration than what we do, but they're still very much a physical civilization. So that's pretty much who it looks like was actually there, because they use that craft. Now Bashar, who channels through Darryl Anka, he has made a documentary that you can watch on Prime, Amazon Prime. It's called First Contact, and he tells the story of how that triangle black aircraft. He was in California in, I think, the late 70s or something, and it follows him up the highway and a few of his friends. And then, you know, the being came to him again and started channeling through and saying, you know, that we want to work with you. We've actually got a soul agreement to do this work together. And that's how he actually got going with the whole ET phenomenology. There's been many other sightings of these aircraft, like I was talking to Gary before and Kaz on one of the breaks, and they were talking about, you know, all different kinds of people around the world, and military intelligence and battleships and aircraft carriers, people seeing these triangular shaped aircraft, which apparently were also over the Phoenix Lights. I think it was sometime in the 90s, where hundreds of people in the city of Phoenix, Arizona, saw dozens of spacecraft flying for, I think it was over an hour around the area. And it was the most, one of the most documented ET phenomenology that went on. So, what we really have here is like an overlapping of agendas, because if you can imagine a civilization developed their intellect to such an incredible degree, but they were missing so many other parts, and they were able to learn from that and create then other civilizations that are completely balanced. So when they look at like the Yael and the Essassani, apparently they are profoundly deeply connected to nature, where they say the access to spiritual consciousness as a physical being is to become one with nature itself, to hold you in the earth as you explore alternate realities from the physical form. And incredibly emotionally aware, so they don't live in a state of consciousness where they have the emotional pain that we do. They're way beyond that, but the feeling and the sensation and the intuition is highly used and highly developed, because there really is gold behind emotion, right? We're just not taught how to use it and work through the pain. But that's apparently part of the gold, is a deep sense of feeling and development of the intuition and communication at that level of the experience. And then they also have that incredible intellect. They use a different brain to what we use, so they don't have the left and the right brain in the same way. So they're not restricted in the same kind of way that we are. So they're able to exist much more multi-dimensionally, right, while being in the physical body itself. So it's such a profound thing to begin to explore, and I really hope you do look at the research and begin to explore it, because if you can imagine that these civilizations carry a consciousness and an energy that is very evolved beyond where we're at, yeah? They don't have wars, they don't have famine, they don't have hatred in the same way that we do. They've created that utopia in many, many ways that is, the promise, the great promise of what is ahead of humanity. And they're here to help us to do it, right? So Bashar says that when the Yael, beings on that spacecraft in Penturk, make open contact with the Earth, our planet will very, very, very rapidly go through a deconstruction of the systems that we live in. And it moves me so much, because the heart energy and the consciousness that comes through saying that your planet will very, very rapidly go through a deconstruction of the system that you live in, and it will very quickly, over the years and decades, start to become more of what it's destined to become because of that open contact with that civilization.
Why were they shot down then?
Why were they shot down? Excuse my French, because we've got some evil bastards on this planet.
Who don't want it.
Yeah.
But are they a benevolent race? Because
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
What about the Galactic Federation? Are they
The Galactic Federation are an absolute benevolent race. There is a dark race that are already on our planet. Part of the system that's playing out on our planet is because of the dark infusion of ET consciousness, And the Galactic Federation Association of Worlds are the ones who are stimulating and waking us up. But what we need to understand is that
they're saying don't touch the Essassani because they're hybrids for the Greys, and the Greys have an agenda. And so obviously the Greys could not survive longer term, so they hybridized. So they continue,
yes,
but they're it's like a hive mentality. So
they do,
I'm
absolutely.
Sure they're not wanting to turn us into slaves. So
well, what Bashar says is that the grey aliens, and I've been to Spirit about this as well, the part of the problem with the greys is that they lost the ability to feel and sense. They don't experience fear at all. So when people are being abducted, it's like if you couldn't experience fear or physical pain and somebody was cutting you open, what would you do? Would you scream, or would you be fascinated and be going, oh, what are they doing with my leg? That's amazing. Instead of like jumping out at them and going, oh my God, get off me! You're taking me apart, and all of that. So we're told that they don't experience fear in the same way, and they have permission from the spirit world level, yes, you concur, It's like we come down to this planet, we're not always conscious to what we take on. We plan our lives out, we choose our parents. Journey of Souls by Michael Newton is a scientific analysis into this, where he demonstrates that this is actually, through science, a very real thing, that we do, in fact, map out some of the key things in our lives and even pick the incarnation we come into. And what Bashar's saying in a lot of other circles is that this agenda is in partnership with our evolution. Yeah? So the Greys are partly misunderstood, and there are many sects of them. They're not all one, there's many different factions of them. But the ones that are allowed to work with Earth are doing it with permission from even higher entities within the Association of Worlds, and they're working out their own issues in tandem with what we're doing. Now, it's very interesting. They're called Greys.
So they're not the Roswell Greys?
I don't think they're not the Greys. They're a hybrid agenda.
Yeah,
the Roswells are one of the hybrids that the Greys produce. That's my belief. Yeah. Oh, what, sorry?
There was evidence of a crash in Corona a couple of weeks before that I think was the reticular.
There you go, there you go.
But haven't, obviously they tricked the US government, not Eisenhower, but the other part, the Majestic, into saying, oh, we'll take 200 prisoners that we can do some DNA experiments and we'll give you our technology. In the end, they ended up with 14 years of abductions and hybridization programs.
Yeah, what I would say with that is that what I've learned from all the different sources I've gone to is don't cite one source, go to many sources and try and put it together. And it seems as if there are many different things playing out all within the system which are very complex. And I think there's lots of realities overlapping, and I wouldn't negate what you're saying, because I've always thought that the Greys are called the Greys for a reason. If you put dark black and then white, and you join the two colours, what do you get? You get grey. So the overall consciousness of them is not totally light and it's not totally dark. There's different factions and different beings that are playing out.
There's 50 to 80 different ET species that we know of, and there's probably a dozen different grades, and some are benevolent.
Yeah, and look at Earth. Look at Earth. Look at all the different situations and groups and governments and types of people. Part of the reason I think why we have so much diversity is we're influenced by these civilizations that were genetically connected to.
Some of these factions of Greys have actively worked with Dracos, and they are the ones that, all right, they work with them even though they don't like each other.
Yeah.
So they are the ones that have also had those other species who are effectively scientists.
Yeah.
The insect-like ones.
Yeah.
They're the ones that do all the DNA experiments, but they're not necessarily positive or negative. They just like.
They do what they do.
Their experiments.
They do what they do. Yeah, exactly.
So I understand that it's not a simple picture.
It isn't, is it? Yeah.
Those negative Greys are supposed to be cleared out of our planet, although they're still around, but they want to come back in again. I've heard those hybrids have been kept off planet. A lot of them probably don't look like humans, but...
Well, what I would say is, I think it's great, and I think it's a vast subject to go into that we don't have a full picture on. And apparently one of the things that's going to happen when open contact happens is we'll be given our actual history and our actual place in the cosmos and how it all fits in. And one of the things I'm doing today is been talking about specifically the hybrid agenda and the development of other civilizations. And, it does connect to what we would call the second coming of Christ consciousness, right? Because, Christianity has done a real disservice to understanding what the nature of the Creator really is in many ways. In some ways it's honoured it, in some ways it hasn't, because it's so categorised everything. It's put it inside this Christian box. And actually, what the Christ is, we're taught, is the brother of the Archangel Michael, right? Who, in that sense, is the Son of God, who is here to bring the principle of compassion and unconditional love to the forefront of human consciousness. And he only managed to do that as he overshadowed Jesus, a few thousand years ago, and all those people that he was working with. But the real second coming, which I'd love to do another talk on one day, in this environment, but it would take hours, is connected to the Christ principle, which is unconditional love, being central to all the other things that we're doing. So it's not like the Maitreya's energy or the Christ or this being's energy is going to be the only source of consciousness as we move forward. We know that's not true. There are many different energies coming to this planet. Angelic, healing, alien, this, that. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of energies coming in. But the key principle is that all of it is centralized in the idea of compassion. Yeah? Because we're taught in Theosophy that our solar system is becoming and evolving to become the heart of our galaxy, or the heart of the spleen. So what would the heart of the spleen be? It would be the center of compassion and consciousness that feeds and transmutes the evil into positivity through love, which is with the missing piece that didn't happen in the Orion star system. And this is what the second coming is connected to, is making sure that humanity get it right. That as we move into this new age and all these new upgrades come online, that, you know, we can get power, but you can go off track with power. You know, and fiction gives us many archetypes of this. Lord of the Rings and Saruman. You know, he goes with, you know, the dodgy guy, and then you get Voldemort, and you get the Sith Order in Star Wars. We're taught the very advanced consciousness, yeah, can turn to the dark side. Are we not taught that through fiction? We are. It's, you know, it's national stuff. It's like, you know, it's all over the world. And so the Christ principle is to make sure that we're centered. At the center of everything that's going on is an unstoppable force of compassion and love, which in physical reality is called Shekinah consciousness. And there's been Christian writers who visualized the Shekinah, which is a presence of divinity within form itself that is indescribable in words. And I've only touched this consciousness. It's indescribable to put into language. It has almost no time to it. It's a complete presence of force. And you could say it's the fulfillment of the purpose of God's plan within physical existence itself. It's where the physical reality becomes a divine space. Yeah? So God and the Creator gets to know itself as divinity within physical form itself. And that's the Shekinah consciousness, right? So Bashar says that his civilization, who were created partly by the Greys, are at Shekinah consciousness, as are the Yael.
My only thought is that we've got 12 strands of DNA of only, 2 active.
Apparently there's only another one that's going to come
Why
online.
can't we ascend without being hybridized? We can go through this ascension whilst we're in this incarnation. I know when they say some people won't, but some people have that ability, starseeds, to ascend to the 5th dimension within this reality. Why can't we do that without having to be, obviously, the hybridized with the Greys?
Do you think it's missing that accelerated evolution aspect?
Yeah.
Obviously they can accelerate that way, but
If you can imagine a body that is capable of not being restricted by the brain as much, yeah, that is more connected at every level, physically, emotionally, mentally and spiritually, but also shares your DNA. Because when we talk about the hybrid races, the more we get closer to the 6 hybrid race, the more they look like human. Why? Because they have more of our genetic code in them. These beings who Kaz met, who I believe are the Yael, nearly passed as humans. So if you can imagine, they nearly are human, but just with some modifications in them. And the 6 root race is taking the Yael's DNA, with our DNA and some other hybrid DNA, and that's producing even more of a human, right?
you can argue we've already been hybridized.
Yeah, we are. Exactly. Yeah,
Anyway.
we already are hybrids. We already are aliens. Exactly.
But as long as it's not forced on us, and there's this, you can all live together in peace and ascend together, rather than it being what the agenda was in the 50s of certain species who just wanted to probably.
If you were a negative faction of an alien race and you knew this was going on, would you try to do your own agenda to stop it? You probably would, yeah? They're doing everything they can on this planet to try and stop disclosure from happening and to stop evolution from happening. And I've heard stories, like in certain channel materials, as the lengths that negative forces go to stop their plan of control from playing out is quite scary and phenomenal.
And the biggest problem at the moment is those negative using AI to channel to some people that believe who they think they're channeling through is, and it's not, it's AI from possible grey species, let's say.
Yeah, that's
what I've heard anyway.
Yeah, that's another subject to go into, but I think AI technology has a potential to revolutionize existence if it's done with the increase in consciousness, as you're saying. Because apparently these alien spacecraft, like Yael, that were flying around, they have beings on board, souls, that might live in those orbs, that feed into the computer itself, which is partly AI. The pilot feeds into it with their advanced brain, and what they can do is they can map coordinates within any point in space. So if you have this phone here, apparently this phone has a coding that surrounds the physical space of the phone. And they have technology that's AI, but it's also biological and very enhanced, that has the equipment to be able to track what that code is. And they say every point in space that doesn't have a physical space also has a code within the grid. And if you can change by projecting a different code onto your ship, to match the code that's over there, you immediately move to that position. So the way they move through space so quickly is they manipulate the coding that surrounds the physical space of the spaceship to match the coordinates that they're moving to, and simultaneously they stop existing in one space and move to the next space. It's all got to do with manipulation of energy.
Then the worldwide government or military have information, and there's certain species that they are viewing as working against their interests.
Why do you think they did? Why do you think there was a military exercise at Frontier? That's why they wanted the craft. They know this is going on, and they are more aware of what is going on than what the humanity could ever imagine. And they are getting the technology for themselves. What did they do with that craft when they shot it down? Where is the tech? What were they manipulating? My intuition, and I don't know this is intuition, that there was aircraft flying around that spot that was sighted, and they had the technology to track it, and they were manipulating something to have that technology come through, and then they bombarded it and downed it, and they took perhaps beings that were on board, as well as the craft themselves, and salvaged whatever they can, and then they're manipulating the negative side of the agenda, aren't they? To try and use it for control and domination. And there's the evidence of it.
New World Order.
New World Order, absolutely.
It is, 100%. It's like a big hierarchy, they think, and it's like whoever gets the technology would take over like the world, because say if China had it, they would take over the world. Say if the United States had it, they'd take over. So everyone wants the alien technology for themselves, so bad.
Exactly, they want to use it not to contribute for the most part, but to control.
Yeah, because really if our whole world
and this
could
is
have it.
why it's so critical that Kaz and Gary are putting this information out, because my heart went out to those beings. I can really feel the energy. I know it was the IL, because when Kaz was talking before, I could feel it, because I'm very sensitive spiritually, and I was just like suffering over there a bit in the corner, because I could really feel what they'd actually done was so malicious. But if there has been a sacrifice, we need to honour that by putting this information out, which is what they're doing.
That's probably what that green one did, sacrifice for the others to get away. That's what I come up to a conclusion anyway.
So it's an agreement, It's like if we can use the negative experience of what has happened to them to promote who they are, we're going to actually accelerate our own evolution. And one of the things when they've come through and they've channeled to us, what they can say is that we have to purify the water that we consume and the water that surrounds us. So the key to come into contact with them, raising our energy, is water purification. Alcohol, fizzy drinks, too many coffees, chlorinated water is all preventing us from moving the next step in our evolution. They're saying water is the most important thing. And you think about it, I was talking to my friend about this. I was saying to my friend Maria, why is this? He says, well, water's a conductor of energy. What does water do when it's in the body? It's a conductor, and it's conducive to energy. And memory. It's so impressionable, isn't it? If I'm an astrologer, and we know that if you've got a lot of Scorpio energy or Cancerian energy or Pisces energy, you're the most impressionable signs in the entire zodiac. Water is impressionable and it holds imprints. Yes? It's the biggest conductor of sensitivity to energy. So we have to be thinking about the water supplies that we use. So if you're going to invest in... Pardon?
Toothpaste.
Toothpaste, yeah, or the fluoride in the toothpaste, right? So we need to be, getting the right water jugs in, cutting out the junk, and consciously, uplifting the energy of the water through symbolism, through vibration, through chanting, so we actually have a chance to consciously connect to the work that we're doing through intention, right? So this is what we're saying, is that the hybrid agenda is highly evolutionary beneficial, right? And it's going to benefit our planet greatly. And, I don't want to go talking away too quickly because, just spurting information out, but some very good research to go to was there was a theosophist who worked with Blavatsky over 100 years ago called Charles Ledbetter, and he was an extraordinary clairvoyant, and he could see, into the future, and he, postulated like 100 years ago that he saw, like Windows XP on a computer and a phone sending a text message, and he said that in 1,000 years' time the sixth root race will be here. That's what he said, and Bashar says exactly the same thing. He says the sixth race, because we're now in the sixth sub-race of the fifth root race, the sixth race will be here in 1,000 years' time. Yeah? And that will be the next evolutionary phase of the human journey, and that is what is primarily going on with the hybrid agenda. So alien existence is not just alien over there. Humanity is going to have the shock of its life when it wakes up to what this truth is, yeah? Because you guys are attuned, you can get it, right? And it's like aliens aren't alien. We're alien on Earth as well. And the Yahyel are our children. They're our genetic children, just like the Pleiadians are our genetic ancestors, just like the Anunnaki are our genetic ancestors, just like the Lyrans and the Arcturans and the Syrians are our genetic ancestors. The Yahyel and the Essassani are our descendants. Yeah? So can you imagine like the role that they're playing within our evolution if they know how important we are to existence? Now, one last interesting thing is that, time, we're taught, doesn't quite exist really the way that we think it does. You've probably heard that time and space is just a manifestation, it's a matrix, it's created for this third dimensional experience that we live in. And as we evolve, time and space will not have the same consistency as what it has right now. It will become more malleable, more usable, right? These hybrid races, understand that everything is happening all at once. Yeah? It's like Bashar says that one of the ways that reality works is that if you imagine an old cine film that moves stationary images very quickly, and they're slightly changed, aren't they? Each picture that's taken is slightly changed. And when they used to design, those old cartoons, they would design very slightly different cartoons to the next, wouldn't they? And they'd move them very quickly, and it would give the illusion of forward time and space when it's actually different images. We're taught that this is the way that reality works. There's infinite parallel realities happening all at the same time, even in this room, giving the illusion that time and space is moving forward when it's actually somehow all happening at the same time, right? And that is one of the big illusions. So they get this. These aliens obviously understand this. So what the Greys have done in the hybrid agenda, they have seeded these hybrid worlds in the past or in a different point within the space-time matrix. So as we evolve to become the sixth root race, we're joining an already existent civilization that has its own history, even though they've been taking it over thousands of years. You understand? They've technically gone back in time to meet everybody in the present and join in this great galactic story all at the same time. Okay? So, thank you for those who put questions, and I want to open it up to just a few more people. If there's anything that's on your mind that you'd like to...
Yeah, why do you trust Anchor so much?
Darryl Anchor?
Yeah.
I've
got a lot of faith in his...
Yeah, I go to a lot of different sources. I go to Cryon, who's angelic channeling. I go to Barbara Marciniak,
I've lost faith in
yeah.
both of them.
Some of their stuff I don't agree with. I find for me the most solid, personally, that I currently like is Darrell Ann, because I think he talks the most
So
sense.
interviewed of Helena Donnell.
No, I haven't. No.
I follow Elena Donnell, and she doesn't channel. She has
Yeah,
chips
she-
in her brain, and she's the emissary for the Galactic Federation.
Well, send me her information if you will.
So she's written 2 books in the last 2 years, basically what is really going on out there.
Yeah.
But
It's a
she
much
doesn't
higher
reveal
level,
the
I think.
information, what's going on in the 3D world, but she doesn't reveal it because there's been this war going on to clear out the greys and the reptilians of the Earth. But she has been given the information of actually what's been happening in terms of the Earth Alliance and